Lesson 25, Loop Example. All right, in this lesson, we're going to put a lot of concepts together and actually come up with a useful macro to format a data set. We're going to go through, we're going to check each record in the data set. We're going to use some flow control to perform different actions depending on the values that we find in that row. Let's get started. Okay, so we have a data set here, invoice number in column A, product in B, quantity, price, revenue, and I want to break the revenue out into three different categories. So over in column F, G, and H, we're going to copy the revenue to the appropriate column based on whether it's product AB, product CD, or product Z. All right, so we're going to use a loop to do this. We'll write a macro that's going to work perfectly for this tiny data set, and then that macro should expand to work with any size data set. Let's take a look at Visual Basic. I'll arrange this here so we can keep our eye both on the worksheet and on the macro. So I'll call it sub format report. Very first thing I want to do, figure out where the last row is. Final row equals cells rows.count, comma 1, dot end, XL up, dot row. All right. One of those things you just have to memorize. Okay, so as we start to think about this, I want to plan out the macro a little bit. Sometimes I write the macro in pseudocode first, just using some comments. So this is figure out where the last row is. I know that later on I'm going to want to loop through all rows from 2 to final row. Within that loop, I'm going to check to see which product we have and copy revenue. Outside of the loop, we're going to want to do some basic formatting. We're going to want to add some totals. We might want to add a title. And as I think about this, as we copy the revenue over from E to either F, G, or H, we probably want to have those columns filled in with zeros first. So I'm going to do that before the loop. I'm going to fill in F, G, and H with zeros. Okay, so the first bit of code is something that isn't going to happen for every record. It's some pre-work that we're going to do. I'm going to say cells row 1, F is the number 6, dot resize. I want to go final row, and F, G, and H is 3 columns, so 3 columns wide. Dot value is equal to 0. That's just going to pre-fill in everything in F, G, and H down to the end of our data set with the number 0. That way I don't have to continuously do that throughout the loop. It would also be good to put some headings up there. You know, we get this data set from the IT department. They don't have headings for those new columns. Those are things that we're going to add. So I'm just going to do it like this, cells 1, 6. I could say dot value. Turns out I don't have to. Dot value is the default action. So I'm going to put a heading up there of A/B. Cells 1, 7 equals a heading of C/D. Cells 1, 8 equals a heading of Z. All right, it kind of helps me to document things. So our loop, remember how it works. We have to choose a control variable. I like the control variable of I, so I say for I equals 2 to final row. Down here at the end, next I. I almost always type the next in as soon as I type the 4, that way I don't forget it. And now inside the loop, we can figure out which product we have, and we want to check to see which product we have and copy the revenue. So I'm going to do that with a select statement. Select case cells I, 2. All right, and that's going to give me either an A, a B, a C, a D, or a Z. And so inside of this select, we will look to see which one we have. So I'll say case A or case B. I'm going to take the revenue from column E of this row and move it over to column F. Now I could do that with a copy, or I could just assign the value. Assigning the value is a great way to go. So cells I, comma 6, that's column F, is equal to cells I, comma 5. All right, so we're saying, hey, the value in column F of this row is equal to the value in column E of this row. All right, next case is C or D. In that case, we'll copy this line of code down. Cells I, comma 7 is equal to cells I, comma 5. Now that we have this going on, I'll copy those 2 lines of code. And we'll say case Z, we move that over to column 8. Finally put in an end select to finish off the select. All right, so as we run this macro, these first few lines up here, the pre-work, those are going to happen once. These lines of code here in the middle will happen again and again and again. In this particular case, they're going to happen 8 times. But in a real-life data set where we have, maybe hundreds of records, those are all going to happen hundreds of times. Now, at the end, outside of the loop, we have some basic finishing things. We can say that total row is equal to final row plus 1. I want to add the word total in column A, so cells total row, comma 1 is equal to the word total in quotes. Over in columns E, F, G, and H, we're going to write a formula that's basically going to add everything from E2 down to the row directly above us. There's several ways to do this. I'm going to go with the more logical way, let's say. So we're going to say cells total row, comma 5, dot formula equals. And I'm actually just going to build a formula here. The formula has to be in quotes. So we say equal sum. And I know that I want to start in E2, colon, E, and then I want to concatenate the final row. And then concatenate the closing parenthesis. Okay, so there's our formula for column E. I also have to add that formula to F, G, and H. To F, G, and H. If there were many of these, like 10 or 12 of them, I would copy from column E and paste to F, G, and H. But the fast way here is just to put that line of code in 4 different times. So in column 6, in column 7, in column 8, we will grab column F, and then column G, and then column H. And the rest of that is all the same. The title in row 1. Okay, now that I'm done with all of this work, I actually want to insert a couple of new rows at the top. So I'm going to say range A1 to A2 dot entire row dot insert, and then conceptually in the new row 1, range A1 equals product report for today. All right, and then we're done. So we can get rid of these extra blank rows at the bottom. All right, so this is a typical macro. Where do we start? We start with final row, something we're going to type all the time. Just a little bit of pre-work here where we're typing some values in some cells. Very simple. And then the loop. This is the heart. This is the piece of the macro that does all of the work, because it's going to repeat this logic again and again and again. At the end of the loop, we add some totals, and then we come down here and add a title. You might also do some other formatting, make some things bold, make that title large, and so on. But this is the basic concept. So let's run this slowly here. I'll start to run F8. Final row, in this case, would be 9. And then we start to go through and run the code. So we pre-fill those values with zeros, and then write in a heading in column F, a heading in column G, a heading in column H. All right, now we're into the loop. So the very first time through the loop, We check to see what product we have. This is product C, so we expect to see this line of code get run. You should see the 1848 appear in cell G2 when I press F8. Perfect, that works. The next time through the loop, we're working on row 3. This time we have a product D, so again, the 4704 should appear in column G, and it does. The next time through the loop, we have a product Z, so that's going to end up over in column H. It does. The next time through the loop, we're looking in row 5, that's a C, so it shows up in row G, and we keep on going through the loop, putting things in the appropriate place each time through. Now that we're done, we've processed all the rows. We're going to calculate that the total row is one more than the final row. I write the word total in there, and then we create our first formula in column E, and then an F, and then G, and then H. We insert a couple of blank rows at the top, and then write our product report for today title up there. All right, so we go from a very ugly data set that we have from our IT department. We end up with a nice looking data set with totals at the bottom, different product categories, all using these simple building blocks of figuring out where the last row is, and then adding the loop to go through and look at each individual record. At the end, just some basic adding totals in. Okay, well, hey, we're talking about loops, but I just want to go back and touch on this bit of logic here where I used the 4 different formulas. There really would be a better way to go there. We could have just copied the first formula. So we would do cells total row, comma 5, dot copy, and then say destination is equal to cells total row, comma 6, dot resize 1, comma 3. And that would have achieved the exact same end result in that we would have just put the first formula in and then copied that to the right. That certainly would work if you have far more columns. I hate to drag you through this, but I do want to talk about the real way that we do this in real life. There is a type of formula that Excel supports called an R1C1 formula. R1C1. And R1C1 goes way, way back to the days of Microsoft Multiplan. It's very obscure. You don't see anyone writing this, but the macro recorder turns out to record this all the time. When the macro recorder gives me an R1C1 formula, for a long time I would just convert it back to an A1 style formula so I could deal with it. It turns out that R1C1 formulas are actually much better and much more flexible. And so rather than these couple of lines of code here, I could have just written one formula into all of the cells at one time. So we say start in column 5, but resize to one row, 4 columns. And we could say instead of formula R1C1, and conceptually we want to sum from row 2 of this column to row 1 up of this column. And the beautiful thing about these R1C1 formulas is they are the same throughout that whole range. So we could actually simplify that line of code to use an R1C1 formula and not have to repeat the lines over and over and over. We'll talk about R1C1 in a bit more detail in a future lesson, but just to get this macro running as well as it can, I'm going to use that formula R1C1. Now here's the big test. So this worked great, with the 9 rows. We now have a much larger data set going down to row 55. Let's run that macro. So I'll click inside the macro and click run. And you see that in an instant it was able to go through, format our data, bring the appropriate products over to columns F, G, and H, added the totals at the bottom. Our total here, that's funny, it put the word total in, but for some reason the font was white. That must be left over from something else. So the totals worked, the totals ended up in the right spot. We're good to go. If we thought that somehow the IT department was really putting that total in white, or that cell in white. Who knows why that was there? We might want to add to our macro the action of changing that back to a normal color. But that was probably just left over from one of the previous lessons, so it's not something I'm going to have to worry about on an ongoing basis. Okay, so there we take our basic loop. This is probably at this point, this macro is the macro that you're going to use again and again and again to solve many, many different problems. I would say that in the whole live lessons at this point, you really have enough to go off and solve many real-world problems using all of the tools that we have here. So lesson 25 kind of puts several concepts together and allows you to come up with a concept that you'll be able to expand to many different situations. Now in the next lesson, lesson 26, we're going to talk about what happens, a very strange anomaly that happens when we have to loop through and delete records. So make sure to watch that before you run off and start creating your own loops, particularly if you need to delete records inside the loop. Thanks for watching this lesson. I hope that you found this lesson helpful.
Looking to advance your career by acquiring new skills? Tired of expensive off-site training programs? Wish you could learn from the best instructors in the industry? Look no further than live lessons. Self-paced, personal video instruction by the world's leading technology publishers. Each live lesson comes with a DVD featuring 3 to 4 hours of instructor-led classroom training, sample program code that allows you to work along with your personal instructor, and an example-rich study guide. Live lessons allow you to watch the entire course from start to finish, or navigate directly to any of the individual lessons. You'll literally watch over the shoulder of your instructor as he shows you how to build state-of-the-art applications. Live lessons, the power of the world's leading technology experts at your fingertips. To learn more, visit mylivelessons.com today.